Welcome to Forming the Future podcast series by Michelmersh. Today we are entering into the podcast title of Sustainability and Style with Ceramics. And joining us today is Alexis Harrison, also known as Lex, if you hear me calling him Lex, who is a brick and architectural ceramics expert and associate at Arup. We've also got Emily Herbert, marketing manager at Michelmersh, and Sarah Gresley, innovation and sustainability director at Michelmersh as well. So without further ado, Lex, please can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Lovely to be here. As you said, a brick and architectural ceramics expert. I work for the engineering consultancy Arup. I'm based in London, but from home today in sunny West Sussex. And I've been in the industry for close to 25 years now. I came from a design background and a background in architecture, and somehow accidentally kind of fell into the brick industry some time ago, and then ended up at Arup as their expert and work on a lot of Arup projects, but also a lot of projects with external clients as well. So many architects, many contractors, building owners, doing pretty much anything from early stage design to circular economy and sustainability, to failure investigation and safety. But predominantly, I would say my main role is designing beautiful facades in brick and architectural ceramics.
And Lex, you've quite rightly said about falling into brick. It's one of those sectors I think that once you're in, you never leave. And so I very much have followed the same journey as yourself. I think it'd be lovely to hear as well how you became a Brick Awards judge, Lex, because I believe is it your eighth year of judging?
Yeah, it's 8 years I've actually taken part in the panel. I'd had a brief hiatus of a couple of years, so it's over a decade I've been involved in it now. Yeah, and it's great. I mean, I was invited by the Brick Development Association to join the judging panel, and turns out I've been the longest standing judge ever. So I suspect they'll throw me off at some point, but for now it's yeah, probably the highlight of my year. It's fabulous to do. I really enjoy some of the categories in particular. You just get to see some brilliant buildings, everything from beautiful private houses to the education categories, often very interesting. Some beautiful schools and public buildings. But yeah, it's something I absolutely love, and love working with the other judges as well.
Are
Has
you
it
still?
changed over sorry, has it changed over the years on what are the key things that make the winners, and what makes it a beautiful or amazing iconic building?
Yeah, I think the focus has always been on brick architecture. It's not a lot of people misunderstand the Brick Awards as being, oh, it's the best looking brick or the best looking brickwork or the best crafted brickwork. And there is a craftsmanship prize, but actually it is about architecture. It's got to first and foremost be a building that meets the client's requirements of function, but needs to delight and needs to be an exemplary example of brick architecture. And it has changed over the years. I think the judges have changed over the years. Some of the judges are great. A lot of them are past winners as well, which I think is really important. So I think I'm the only one that's a consultant, but some of the judges are brickwork contractors, others are architects, and they're all at the top of their game as well. They're all renowned architects, they're all renowned contractors. And I think that's really important. That's the thing that's changed the most. So we have some pretty friendly but fierce debates. It's never a done deal. There's always a lot of discussion and debate as to who the winners are.
Are you starting to see a transition, Lex, with projects that are moving towards refurbishment? And really, I'm kind of coming at this from the kind of retrofit space. And something that we're kind of really passionate about is moving towards more of a circular business model, reuse of products, etc. Are you seeing that coming through in some of the submissions? People recognizing the sustainability aspects more of each of these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a sustainability prize which we're judging tomorrow. Actually, is focused purely on the sustainable credentials of a project. That does come through in all of the entries, but with the sustainability prize itself, that's quite actually surprisingly difficult to judge, because it might be a private house that's built built to the highest sort of standards of sustainability with net zero carbon aspects in the building. It could also be a building that won a couple of years ago was Bigfield and Clegg Bradley project. Sustainability in the Brick Awards comes through in most of the projects now, and that's partly because of mandatory requirements, especially around London. But it's also often client demands. Certainly clients, developers are putting a lot more onus on projects to be more sustainable. There's also a sustainability specific prize in the Brick Awards. I'm leading the judging of that this year, and that's a relatively new prize. It's the third year we've done this, and it's surprising the breadth of projects in terms of what defines sustainability. So it might be a project that's just built to the very highest standards of air tightness, thermal performance, and energy systems in the building, or it could be complete reuse of a building. A project that was entered a few years ago was a converted mill, and they used reclaimed bricks as much as possible where replacement brickwork was required, and built to a very, very high standard. So there's all kinds of aspects that make a project sustainable or not, and some of them are clear, and some of them aren't.
And that's where it's quite exciting to see that reuse of brick as well coming through with some of the submissions. I know I think it was Houghton School and a number of other regeneration projects that we've had as well over recent years, where it's a really nice synergy between new brickwork having to be matched with existing brickwork to recover as much materials from the previous built example of that building into the showing that flexibility and adaptability into the new design, which is really lovely to see these coming through more so in these submissions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's no better example of circular economy of reusing an entire building, and of course that means different things. It could mean a conversion of something like Bankside Power Station into the Tate Modern, or Battersea, or many of the hundreds of converted 18th century, 17th century brick warehouses around the world. But there's also the more contemporary concept of deep retrofit, where an existing primary structure is taken. And for example, sort of projects we're doing in Arup, not necessarily brick, but very often brick. And there was an entry in this year's awards. I can't give anything away about that, but an example where building was stripped back to its primary structure, which saved hundreds of tons of carbon by retaining the foundations, obviously retaining the structure, and then recladding it with a high performance facade. But what needs careful consideration is the payback time. If you strip a facade off a building and replacing it, there's obviously a great deal of embodied carbon that goes into the materials to build that replacement facade. But that will improve the performance of the building. If it's a 60s office building which overheats in summer, freezing cold in winter, you massively reduce the energy output required to keep that building warm and keep that building cool. How quickly does that energy saving, in terms of savings in carbon terms, how quickly does that repay relative to the embodied carbon you invest in replacing the facade? In general, it's different for every project, but in general, the embodied carbon that's invested in putting a new facade on a building of that type usually pays back in about 10 to 15 years. So it's usually the right thing to do. And it can make a building much more attractive to tenants, for example, if you're a city-based building owner or developer letting out buildings to either residential or commercial use. So you can charge a lot more for rental of that building. But also you can turn it around a lot quicker. The capital costs of doing so is much diminished because you're just replacing the facade. But also you can do that much quicker. You get that building bought, refurbished and sold or rented much faster. Yeah, that aspect of recycling entire buildings is really important, and something that's really exciting, making a quite considerable difference in what's a carbon intensive industry, building stuff.
And are you seeing a difference with the way architects and designers may be coming to Arup for advice in terms of understanding the true life cycle analysis of buildings and considering the fact that clay bricks have great longevity and durability, and you know, we know that they last for 150 years plus. Are you seeing people making conscious decisions towards a built environment that can last for many generations, or are you seeing it indeed in the reverse in terms of kind of short-term decision making, just focusing on the embodied instead of thinking about the operational carbon in combination with it?
I think it's both. I think the clay brick industry has always marketed that aspect of longevity, which of course is absolutely valid. But there are some aspects that are making brick much more attractive to architects and developers. That longevity is important, but a lot of projects might only have a 30-year design life. Better quality projects tend to have 60 years. Occasionally we do 120. Actually, we're working on the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which has got a 500-year design life. That's a first. Pretty sure I won't be getting the blame if something does go wrong in 450 years, but we think it'll last. But I think that's really important. It's that we are in a climate crisis. We do need to reduce carbon now. It's no good looking at that payback period of the carbon that you invest in the brickwork over 120 years, because we've got to reduce carbon now. But there's also been some massive gains in terms of how you can recycle clay brickwork, although it's something that's always been said of brick. Yes, you can reuse it. The practicalities of doing so, particularly with 20th century and later 20th century buildings, have always been technically very, very challenging. But now there's some great technology that automates brick reclamation that make it much more cost effective and make it a reality. So I think, to answer your question, there's a lot of emphasis on what is the carbon content, what is the EPD of a brick now, how's that going to compare with other materials being used in a facade, and it generally compares very well, of course, compared to perception that brick has an extremely high embodied carbon. It doesn't. It's not the lowest, but it's one of the lower materials, especially when combined with other facade systems.
It does feel difficult to analyse that if designers are working to a 30-year study period, that is quite short-term thinking in terms of sustainability. Why do we want to be thinking of a building that's only going to last 3 decades? That does seem really, really low. But I think we must also think how the challenges when it comes to data collection on things like EPDs, like we've spoken about in the past, is that we as manufacturers are aiming to decarbonise as quick and as fast as we possibly can to make this a commercial reality. And as soon as we publish something, it's immediately out of date. But we are working really hard to try and get those EPDs out, to get them to our customers ASAP. But for us, it's also, we're putting a huge amount of investment to decarbonise the product, so we're trying to address that embodied carbon element that you mentioned as well. And for us, the focus over the next few years and some of these really exciting projects that we're working on in the background are to focus on data and optimization of our factories, and that's bringing down the energy consumption of the factories first and foremost, because we have obviously, and as you know, have worked towards 100% green hydrogen product that we've demonstrated can be made. However, it's all about reducing what we consume first and foremost before we look at alternatives and switching. And so for us, a focus over the next few years will be indeed bringing down that natural gas consumption for our factories, and really looking to improve the energy efficiency of our products per tonne of product being made, so that we are delivering as best as we possibly can, and we're also looking at how we can switch to things like hydrogen and other ways of heat recovery within the business that could be groundbreaking in some respects as well. So there's a lot happening in that space, and it's about trying to keep the data to be updated in line with as fast as we're trying to work on the things that we're doing in the factory, which is a real challenge, and also to educate and to converse with architects and designers and contractors about the things that we're trying to do and deliver as quickly as we possibly can as well. So we're really trying to, I suppose, bring the embodied and operational carbon argument forward as quickly as we possibly can.
Yeah, it's been really impressive. Some of the stuff that's been going on in the both the brick industry and the ceramics industry in terms of decarbonisation, and it's a massive challenge. It's of course if it was that easy, everyone would have done it already. I know the primary cost of ceramics is the brick, whether that's brick or more conventional ceramics. The primary cost is the gas, the energy used to produce them. So there's been a financial incentive long before there was a sustainability incentive. But I'm delighted, having worked in the brick industry, having had worked in the brick industry many years ago, that was still a focus then and is still a focus now. So in many ways, although the brick industry could be criticised for not having enough EPDs or enough data, like you say, it's incredibly difficult to generate that data and above all make it accurate, which of course is vital. But actually, that's the same in pretty well most other industries as well. It's a really challenging thing to do. So I think actually the brick industry is doing a very good job of that. Obviously, there's always more that can be done, of course, and clearly getting on with that. So it's good to see.
As well as everything that we've discussed, a big part of your role is to make buildings look beautiful and to guide your clients on how to help it fit into the environment, or how to help it be unique, or whatever the design briefing would be. But to you, as an expert in the ceramics world, what in your eyes makes ceramics beautiful in architecture?
Well, that's a good question. I think for me it's the input of craft, it's the input of love that's gone into it. And I mean, this is always a challenge with the Brick Awards. For example, let's take the education category. You might have a project that is a local authority funded school in a not particularly wealthy or affluent part of the town, or it might be a new sponsored building in an elite public school in Oxford or somewhere, which we've seen, built with a huge budget by a star architect. And for me, it's just where the love and delight has gone into it. It's really hard how you compare those kind of projects as which are winners when the budgets can be an order of magnitude apart. But that is possible, and of course it's very challenging being an architect just to break even sometimes, I think, and the number of hours you can put into a project. But where that element of craft and understanding has gone in, that for me is what makes a project beautiful. And that can be done very economically. It's just a question of time and effort and energy and passion. But where that comes through, it's amazing. Particularly good example of that last week. Actually, I was up in a visiting a project where I spend a lot of my time looking at failures of products. So this was a 30-year design life PFI project, which is about 20 years old. So 10 years left of its design life, that was covered in a brick slip system. And there's good brick slip systems and bad brick slip systems. This was one of the bad ones, and the adhesives had given up, and there were brick slips falling off this building. So I spent most of the day walking around this building, just looking at defects, looking at rotten timber, just looking at cracked brickwork, and wondering how many skip loads of rubbish are going to come off this building that can't be recycled. And then on the way home, I had to go via Coventry station, and my train got cancelled, so I had about an hour. I thought, I'd never been to Coventry Cathedral, and I went to Coventry Cathedral. It's this fantastic post-war building built adjacent to the remains of a medieval cathedral that was bombed and almost fully destroyed in the Second World War. And I had no idea there was such a beautiful building in Britain. It's definitely the most beautiful building I've ever visited in this country. Absolutely blew me away. And it was the elements of craft. Actually, there wasn't a lot of ceramics in it. It was a lot of concrete, a lot of stone. There were ceramics in it as well, but it was just how beautifully materials can be put together. And glass, of course, is beautiful contemporary artwork in the glazed windows. But it is that. In fact, I've got a few quotes on my desk that I leave for inspiration. They're hidden by my monitors. But yeah, there we go. Architecture starts when you carefully put two materials together, which was Mies van der Rohe, which I love. And I think that's to me what makes a good building.
It is all about collaboration, isn't it? And no one building is ever one material as a kind of monostructure, is it? So there's got to be that integration that's key to any building, and the craft is what makes it special at the end of the day, and all the people who are involved in those projects. Lex, you recently presented, I believe, at the Clerkenwell Design Week. Was it for the one wall innovative low carbon masonry wall system? Can you tell us a little bit about that? That's going into the architectural ceramics space, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a fantastic project. Something we're still working on. It was a collaboration through an event called ACOR, which sadly I participated last year, but it was the last ever one, or the last one in its current form. It's been running for 9 years, and ACOR stands for Architectural Ceramics Assembly Workshops. It's a collaboration with an American terracotta producer called Boston Valley and the University of Buffalo, and it was fantastic. Every year they get a group, 6 teams of each team is made up of usually architects and a facade engineer, and they have to design a cladding system made predominantly from architectural terracotta, and then Boston Valley go and make the components, and then 6 months later everybody assembles in the University of Buffalo School of Architecture workshop and builds a sample panel, large 8 by 4 foot, 2.4 by 1.2 meters panel of the system. This last year, 2024, I led a team of Europeans, as we call ourselves at Arup, a transatlantic Arup team to enter the architectural ceramics assembly workshops, and we were the first time where it was an engineering company only rather than architects. But in my team I had architects turned facade engineers, so we had a couple of facade engineers, structural engineer, another architect specialising in infrastructure, and we came up with this concept to try and simplify masonry facades. Up until the early 20th century, masonry buildings were just that. You would have a load-bearing structure, whether it was brick or stone or terracotta or a combination of all of them, with load-bearing floors. The floors would span across the outer walls, and they were relatively simple to build. The problem was they weren't insulated. Energy, heat would transfer straight through the facade, so they were cold, they were damp, and it was difficult to build very tall buildings until the introduction of steel structures. So now what we have when we have a building taller than about 2 stories is you have effectively a masonry skin on the building. Typically that's 102 millimeters thick of brickwork, or could be stone, could be terracotta, could be concrete. But masonry is not really masonry, it's a cladding. And the facades are getting more and more complicated to design. You said you talked to somebody about Part L. Achieving Part L, the building regulation requirements for reducing energy and improving thermal performance of buildings, is really difficult to achieve these days. And there's a huge number behind every simple looking brick facade. There's a huge number of components, bits of stainless steel, bits of aluminium, fire cavity barriers, insulation, wall ties, cavity trays, drips, all kinds of stuff going on in there. And every time I'm looking at a brick cavity wall, I'm thinking, this is so complicated. Surely it could be easier. If only we could go back to the traditional notion of a load-bearing masonry wall. So that's what we've tried to achieve. So we've come up with a composite block. It's got hard, robust, durable and beautiful glazed terracotta on the outside and the inside of this block, which form the face, the internal face of the product as well. And then in the middle is a block of foam glass, which is made from recycled glass cullet into a foamed, rigid, load-bearing material. The 3 materials are sandwiched together currently with adhesives, but will be mechanically and stacked. And what this does is it means you can build a masonry wall up to 8 stories without additional metal reinforcement that becomes a load-bearing brick or masonry facade again. And what it does, it makes it a lot easier to design, it makes it a lot easier to build, and it reduces the embodied carbon because you're not using all these bits of stainless steel and other high carbon materials to reinforce it and provide all the the inner structure and all the bits that go inside the cavity. So we reckon it could be as much as 30 to 40% carbon reduction based on business as usual construction. As usual with anything that looks simple, it never is. And again, if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. So we've got a bit of a way with further developing the product and the system. But at the moment, all the calculations and consideration we've given to the system in terms of thermal, structural, acoustic performance and buildability seem to play out. So we think it's a game changer for the industry.
It sounds very exciting, Lex, and it does sound like something that for the future, again, the kind of use and the composition of less materials equals more, doesn't it, in terms of the output of what you would hope to expect for a long-standing building that can give back to the community but still also achieve the same thermal performance or better, maybe. With that in mind, Lex, is there any other kind of evolving trends that you're seeing with architectural ceramics? And obviously the long history that architectural ceramics has played within our built environment. Are you seeing that evolving into kind of modern specifications outside of obviously this innovative project that you're talking about? Is it becoming more common?
Yeah, architectural ceramics seem to be continually on the up in the world of architecture. They've sort of they kind of disappeared. There was some beautiful. We can all think of architectural terracotta, which is unglazed terracotta material, and what's called faience, or in the UK it's called faience, which is glazed architectural terracotta. And there's some fabulous buildings from the late 1800s up until the 70s and 90s. Buildings like the Natural History Museum in London, and Harrods and the Albert Hall, and all the beautiful dark red faience London Underground stations, the Leslie Green design stations in this what's called ox blood, dark burgundy terracotta, and fabulous buildings in North America too, like the Flatiron building in Manhattan is actually built from terracotta, even though it's kind of made to look like granite. And there's always beautiful, and some beautiful Art Deco buildings and buildings generally from the 20s and 30s with wonderful glazed colours. And architectural ceramics kind of disappeared really until the development of extruded terracotta rain screen cladding by Renzo Piano and others in the late 1990s, early 2000s. But it continues to evolve. The manufacturers get very closely involved with architects, developing surface finishes, so the glazes that go on the terracotta. And there's a whole rich world of glazes that can be tapped into from ceramic artists, from tableware as well, but particularly ceramic artists, multicoloured glazes that react at different kiln temperatures and create these wonderful, wonderful effects. But also the form of the materials as well, new ways of shaping. Extrusion is common. That's the most economical way of making architectural terracotta or architectural ceramics, but also pressing, ram pressing, slip casting, which has been around since Victorian times. And there's been some great inroads into 3D printing of ceramics, as well as carving ceramics using multi-access robotic tools to take an extrusion, and then the tool comes down with a wire and carves them. So really the imagination is the limit with architectural ceramics, and every time I think I've seen it all, and every time I'm thinking maybe this is good, we've reached peak ceramic, somebody comes along and blows my mind with some other new wonderful building. So.
But, I mean, as well, are you seeing any other trends in the brick space then, Lex, that you think is worthy of highlighting? With the obviously we've mentioned about recycled content and the reuse of products. There are different materials coming through using different waste streams and things as well. We're seeing other types of unitized products as well on the market. Are you seeing any particular trends that you think are kind of really modern practice today?
Yeah, I've always said that the brick industry the construction industry generally doesn't really innovate much. It always seems very slow moving. Always comparisons to like the car industry and prefabrication and robotic fabrication, and that argument's been going on for many years. In terms of trends in the brick industry particularly, yeah, there's quite a number. one key one is, you mentioned alternative materials. So we've got clay bricks, and clay bricks can vary hugely from the most modern, state of the art, ultra efficient factories in the UK and Europe, which make effectively a material that's very although it's burnt from gas, obviously a fossil fuel that also has emissions. They are remarkably low carbon, remarkably low embodied energy. But that shouldn't take away from some of the more traditional brickworks as well, who form a very small part of the market, often old family firms, sometimes family firms that have been taken over by larger companies. I think your own Freshfield Lane Brickworks is fairly close to my home, and every historic building in the area where I live has bricks that were made using those kind of craft techniques, and I'm quite sure they're not the lowest in terms of carbon, probably the opposite, but actually they're a really important part of our built heritage. But in terms of environmental impact, yes, they have a higher impact compared to more modern production methods, but they are a really vital part of our heritage, and in overall terms they're a tiny bit of the market compared to the mass production market of bricks and ceramics.
I think sorry, Lex, I was just going to say as well, though, that's where it's really exciting to have the opportunity to focus on innovating those crafts, to keep the craft element, but bring down the carbon if we possibly can. So absolutely, you picked out Freshfield Lane there, the factory of my choice for all of the exciting decarbonisation projects that we are pushing forwards with as a company, because it is the product that everyone really wants. It's beautiful, it's tactile, and it's the most challenging to decarbonise, but we might as well do the most difficult one first.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. And in terms of other innovations that I'm seeing, there's also alternatives to clay brick. I was chatting to my sort of opposite number in the Arup Materials team, a lady called Paola Blasi, who's she's a geologist but also a architectural stone expert of over 30 years experience, and she was saying how every materials industry seems to be encroaching into each other's territory. So she's working with stone companies who are making conventional metric sized bricks. Stone quarriers and fabricators are making bricks, but also they're getting it from Italian ceramic producers who are making fake stone ceramics. Everybody's encroaching, but that's kind of fine. Yeah, certainly natural stone is an interesting alternative to clay. We've seen materials products that are made from recycled aggregates. Companies like Kenatech, who Arup are supporting through the Earthshot Prize, actually currently make a wonderful product up in Scotland made from recycled aggregates. There's others as well, but also modern. You mentioned modern methods of construction. That's something that's absolutely not going away. I spent yesterday standing on a 25th story rooftop in northwest London, looking at all the residential tower blocks popping up and looking very closely at them installing a brick slip cladding system on a high-rise building. And I mentioned earlier that some brick cladding systems have serious concerns about their safety, which I've raised widely in the industry. Other systems are much more robust, but brick slip cladding is here to stay. The speed at which they were erecting this facade was incredible, and clearly is a threat to conventional hand-laid brick. But it is a credible alternative. Also, we see cast-in systems, more and more conventional precast. So this is brick with so half brick placed in a mould with reinforced concrete cast onto the back. It seems to be becoming more and more used, particularly in tight city centre and town centre locations where it's very difficult to erect a scaffold and have bricklaying contractors on scaffold for months on end. You can just bring the panels in early in the morning on a lorry and crane them onto the building, and the street's clear by mid-morning. That's becoming more and more increasingly used. I am concerned about the additional embodied carbon in all of these systems compared to conventional brickwork, which is typically lower. Although again, there's a lack of really good data. We're doing a more we've done a lot of analysis of this at Arup, working with our big facade engineering team, and they've got a really good carbon calculator tool. But every facade is different, every solution is different. It's really hard to compare apples and apples, but generally conventional hand-laid brickwork is the lowest in terms of carbon, usually has the best outcome, but is not the quickest or necessarily the most convenient. The other methods appear to have higher embodied carbon, but precise figures we're still working on for comparison. But I think modern methods of construction are here to stay, in the form of prefabricated panels or prefabricated components, and they do need a lot more scrutiny. Some are very safe, very proven, very well tested. Others are highly certified, but in my opinion, dangerously unsafe and don't have the longevity even of 30-year design lives, and concern me when they're used on very tall buildings.
You can see that the use for prefabrication is obviously there. We've got a prefabrication brand which does offer brick slip solutions, as you've mentioned, obviously certified with BBA, etc. But it's important that there is that piece of the market, like you said, that can offer the really quick turnaround for an urban site that's got a tight construction schedule, and there will always be certain use cases for different types of products. But I'd certainly welcome and love to hear from you, Lex, when you do have more data on that, because it's certainly something that we're also looking to advance our data on traditional versus prefabrication, obviously being a business that offers both now. So certainly would welcome better data for that in the future. With the kind of future outlook then, Lex, and we talked about alternative materials, and again, I mean, it kind of sings back to what we were saying in the beginning, in terms of all products have their place in a building, and not any building will be one monotone type of material into the future, and it's a collaborative effort of different materials and systems and contractors and craftsmen, so and women, and so it's exciting to go into the future, and I would like to think that over the next kind of 5-10 years we will still continue to innovate. And like you said, it's not something that's just started over the last few years. The industry has been evolving and innovating for decades, and constantly evolving towards market demands and stresses and the needs for a lower carbon, more efficient product that's got great thermal performance and longevity. So certainly a lot for us to go out there in terms of opportunities into the future, and thinking about the retrofit market more. I'd love to see that. We've got to make sure our homes are climate resilient for the future into the next decades, and looking at improving thermal performance, and that resilience piece is really a focus, I think, that we should all have as manufacturers going into the future. So it's been a really interesting talk today, Lex. I've really enjoyed the different subjects. Is there any final takeaways that you would like to say about where the sector is, the challenges, or indeed the beautiful aesthetics of ceramics?
Yeah, I think probably two key things. I think one is that brick is one of the good guys or girls in the overall sort of picture of architecture generally. When you look at the overall facade build-up of a masonry clad wall, whether it's brick or could be stone, could be other materials, or even just a rain screen cladding, the embodied carbon of that is generally pretty well the best type of facade system that you can use, just using kind of conventional materials. When you compare it to things like precasting or especially compared to unitized curtain walling, where you've got very energy intensive use of materials and often very poor thermal performance with it. The other area I think that's really exciting is the opportunities for recycling and reusing clay bricks. It's always been a bit of a niche market for architectural reclamation specialists who would take very high value, very attractive bricks. Take London yellow stock bricks, for example, which can be you can dismantle them from a building, chip the mortar off by hand, which is extremely expensive to do in labour terms. But then you can sell them for £3, £4, £5 a brick, because people will pay that money for a beautiful brick on a very expensive extension on a house in Chelsea or something. But actually now mechanised brick reclamation systems are becoming, with the technologies there, it's going to take another couple of years before it meets the market. But I think actually mechanically reclaiming bricks is a reality now, and actually dismantling brick dismantling buildings and reclaiming whole bricks rather than just crushing it up for road base aggregates or the other sort of downgraded recycling streams that brickwork normally goes into is a really exciting area, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation in that. It's something I hope the brick industry themselves will actually get closely involved in, because I think far from a threat to production of new bricks, I think the industry is in a strong position to embrace it, given their reputation, their ability to test products and certify reclaimed materials, but also distribution networks, existing customers, all of that sort of thing. So I really want to see recycled clay brick becoming a pretty well day-to-day consideration, rather than something that people talk about early in a project and never really happens.
Couldn't agree more. I'm certainly really excited about it myself as well, and the opportunities that it presents. But thank you very much, Lex. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Today's series was called Sustainability and Style with Ceramics, as part of the Forming the Future series from Michelmersh. A big thank you to Lex Harrison, the brick and architectural ceramics expert at Arup, and Emily Herbert, the marketing manager of Michelmersh. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.